Hey y'all, how are you? This is Natasha, founder of Never Launch on a Friday. Excited to have you here for this week's podcast. This week, we are going to be talking about a huge mind block I see around some of my colleagues, my peers, my friends. And I'm going to be giving my take on whether or not people are predisposed to business success. And I am going to give you my very honest opinion about this. This comes from a conversation I was having with a colleague of mine. She has hundreds and hundreds of thousands of followers online. She is a huge thought leader in her space, but makes zero money, maybe $10,000, $15,000 a year. And she's incredible at what she does. Absolutely amazing at what she does. The quality of her work, the quality of her content. And she's constantly frustrated because she doesn't make money with this much reach. Like, she's definitely a thought leader, like, in her space. And one of the things that she and I talk about is that, okay, there's certain things you need to do and certain ways of thinking that you need to think if you want to make more money doing what you're doing, right? And her response has always been, I don't know. I don't think I'm cut out for this. I don't know. I don't think I have the gene for this. I don't think you know, I don't know if I was made to be an entrepreneur. And I have a lot of strong feelings about that. The thing that we don't think about as entrepreneurs is we forget or want to ignore that people who are achieving things that we aren't achieving generally is not a genetic component. If you are, let's just say, forgetting sports and music, let's talk about building a business. Most of what people who are successful entrepreneurs would tell you is that it's a learned skill. It is not something that you're born with. It is not like a yes or no. It is a question of having the courage to get better at what you do, both in your external mechanics of running a business, but also in your mind. And if this is your first time coming to Never Launch on a Friday, this podcast is all about helping us female agency owners how to break the net that keeps our brain trapped. And I always say this every week, but it's giving the visual of you're in a fisher net, or like a fishing net, right? And you're stuck in this net and it's tight and you're all cramped in. And to get out, you need to cut the cords, cut the net. I don't know what the word is that is going to help you get out of this net, right? And cutting this net is cutting the barriers of your comfort zone off your brain. And it's okay, but then as soon as you start moving outside of your comfort zone, things start feeling very uncomfortable. And that's obviously comfort zone, right? So it starts feeling very stressful. You can feel very out of control. You'd be very overwhelmed. And it's these edges, right? It's these edges that if we're in our comfort zone here, and then we go out and, oh my God, it's stressful. And then we come back and we go out and it's, oh my God, it's stressful. And then we come back. And it's how do we learn to feel more comfortable in these edges so that we can slowly expand where our comfort zone is, right? And it's learning how to regulate ourselves, how to heal that trauma, how to heal the pain, how to heal the beliefs that have kept us stuck in this spot, right? And I want to give my opinion about that message I got from my colleague and my unadulterated opinion on why I think she's stuck, why I think I get stuck, why I think all human beings get stuck. And I'm working through a certification right now all about trauma-informed leadership, trauma-informed coaching. And one of the things we talk about a lot is who we are as human beings. Who we are is not a predetermined thing. I was talking to another colleague of mine the other day, who was talking about personality profiling. And we were talking about Enneagram and Myers-Briggs and human design and StrengthsFinder. And we were looking at all these things. And I used to be obsessed with personality profiling. I thought that was amazing. When I found human design, I was like, oh my God, this is it was so aligned to who I was. But then I started thinking about it. And I'd love your thoughts on this. And I would love your feedback that as I started learning more about trauma, I really began to see that so much of our personality is created in a response to pain. And so much of our personality becomes a survival adaptation to our environment. In that if you look at your personality, you can probably trace a lot of your strengths back to survival skills. And then you can look at your trauma And where you get blocked and where you can't do it also as a survival skill to how you grew up, maybe an environmental component, maybe a developmental component, maybe a generational component. And it's okay. Who we are, and this is just a thought pattern to me that's just fascinating, is I used to believe that as well, that you were born with a very specific thing. I've talked about this in other podcasts. You've got a call. You were crafted by design. You were born with this energy type. You were born with these strengths. You were born with this and that and this and that. And I used to really believe that. I just found it was so helpful to be able to like put myself in these buckets, right? But then I would retest myself against these things years later and I would have different results. I was like, wait a second, like I'm not that personality anymore. I'm not that type anymore. I'm not that number anymore. And I look at my human design and I'm like, what made so much sense 5 years ago? I look at it now and I'm like, I don't know if I'm like that anymore, like per my design. And there's elements of all of them that are true. But what I want you to understand is there is no one resource that's going to tell you who you are, what you do, what you can do, what you can't do, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. That is on you. You get to decide that. And if you're in a place where you're feeling trapped by this version of your identity and you're feeling it does not serve you, it does not like align to the vision that you have for your life, to take the idea that, okay, no one in my family is an entrepreneur, I'm not strong enough, I'm not stable enough, I'm not whatever enough to achieve this goal that I've had for years, I want to change the conversation. The conversation should not be whether genetically, personality, your energy type, whatever, is not whether you have it. It's whether you're willing to create it. And this is so interesting to me because, like, again, I was the queen of personality profiling. I was a recruiter, and it can tell you maybe where you are now, but it doesn't tell you who you can be if you want to create yourself into something else. And so going back to this example of my colleague, it's the question of, okay, so for example, she is a solopreneur. She has tons of comments, tons of like people replying to her stuff. She runs an offer and tons of people reply. She just doesn't follow up with them because she doesn't like sales. And it's like, okay, you might need to hire some help to help you with your sales process if you don't like working with sales. So there's two ways to look at it. So let's just look at the sales thing, right? Because she has tons of interaction, tons of engagement in her stuff. She's a really big thought leader in her space, right? And it's okay. So number one, on a practical level, she hates sales. She hates it. Okay. So if you hate sales, you got to get a salesperson on your team. Simple. If the business hates sales, you hate sales, someone in the world loves sales and has experience selling what you do. Let's find them. Let's bring them in. Let's get them trained. Let's get them paid. Let's get you making money. However, she doesn't want to hire anybody. She doesn't want to hire help. And so the practical component is she needs a salesperson. Okay, stay with me. Now we look at the trauma component. She doesn't want to hire help because she has seen in other businesses it going so badly, it creating more problems, more cost. She doesn't think she can afford it. And meanwhile, there are hundreds of people reaching out to her for her support. So she doesn't see that though. She doesn't see that there's literally money sitting in her inbox, like sitting in her Instagram inbox. She just sees it's way too much to do. It's too stressful. She's going to have to sell them. Doesn't even get to it. Just ignores it. She has a lot of medical issues that I really feel is psychosomatic to like as an excuse to not have to do it. Her brain creates a reason for her to feel tired, feel sick because she doesn't want to face it, right? So now we have to look at the trauma. Okay, so she comes to dump. So she 100% against hiring help. I personally love building teams. I love working with brilliant people. I've offered to teach her so many times how to build teams, how to build even just one person, like an assistant on the team. I have 3 assistants. I could absolutely teach her how to do that. She's not interested. She doesn't care. And I'm like, you could get someone for like $10 an hour to help you out. This does not have to be an expensive hire. And then it's, I don't have the money. But now you're in a chicken and the egg situation. Until you hire help, you will never have the money. Stuck. The help helps you make the money, right? You can't just like, I don't have the money. Well, you don't have the money because you're not making the sales. Why aren't you making the sales? Because you don't have any help, because you don't like doing it. Okay, if you don't have any help, you're gonna have to like do that upfront investment, put it on a credit card, take it out of the equity in your house, whatever you need to do to get that person there. Take it out of your savings. I get it. It sucks, but it's like you need to like get that person in place so you can break out of this loop, right? But I know for sure being a trauma-informed entrepreneur is like that fear of I can't hire somebody, I can't trust anybody, no one's going to do it like me, no one's going to care, no one's going to like bring the same quality, the same work ethic, I can't count on anybody else. That is trauma. That belief is trauma. So what the solution is beyond just forcing her, because I've known her for a long time, she has hired countless coaches, countless sales coaches. She's taken courses. She like prays about it. Great. Those are all great things. But until you inside solve the pain that is blocking you from hiring help who could help you with your sales, you are stuck year after year after year making no money. Okay, this is just an example. Follow the logic, right? This is just an example. Her situation is sales. Mine is probably something else. Yours is probably something else. It's fine, right? Everyone's got a thing. Everyone's got a thing. No one is immune. Everyone has trauma. Let's just put that out there. Everyone has trauma. I'm not better than her. I'm not different than her. We're just using this as a very obvious example that a lot of us can relate to in the marketing space, right? So she struggles with the idea of hiring help. She has a lot of pain and a lot of trauma around this. So the question now becomes, where did this come from? Why? Why do you have so much anxiety around the idea of hiring help, right? And then we do kind of this what's the word? Uncovering the layers of what really is, right? So we look at, okay, like let's take an example of like, no one's going to do it as well as I'm going to do it. Well, why do you think that? Well, I think that because, I worked with someone before over and over and over and they dropped the ball and it cost us lots of money and we almost went out of business and it was a bad hire and it was so much stress and it wasn't worth it and whatever. And it's like, okay, well, why do you believe that everyone in the world is like that? And you kind of start going through these layers and you get to this fundamental belief, like what is the bottom of this belief? And then you work on the healing there. You work at the core. So maybe she has this really core belief after all of these things, and I can give an example. I'll use my own life as an example because I can't speak for her, what she's thinking. But it's like I used to think about, for example, I used to be very, very, very afraid of creating content. I have no problem now on LinkedIn. I will say whatever that comes to my mind that I feel would be useful. But before years, I would think about creating content and I would feel physically ill. I would feel so sick to my stomach. I just wanted to die. The idea of it just made me want to die, right? And I did my own backtracking this. Where did this come from? And I grew up in a family with a very judgmental parent of something like if I didn't do it their way, I was doing it wrong. And I know that my opinions are very, very different than one of my parents. And for me to stand up and say that and say things that would probably be interpreted as very controversial or embarrassing to her in some way, or just something that was like misaligned to quote unquote how I was raised, I was very scared to say anything that someone might disagree with because of just so much blowback when I would do something growing up that I wouldn't agree with. So I really learned to shut up, keep the peace, don't say anything, don't take up any space. And I lived in this very small bubble. I didn't say anything. I didn't do anything. I played it safe. I made sure nobody was angry. And that was my life for 43 years of my life, let's say. I was always being nice, always being the kind one, always being the supporter, the cheerleader. But I had so much to say. But the reason I didn't say it is because I was worried about getting in trouble. Because growing up, I got in a lot of trouble when I had opinions that contradicted her opinions. And I had to work through that. I had to heal that trauma. And now I say whatever I want to say. I will show up. I will say something. I publish every single day. And now it doesn't bother me. But for 43 years, it did. I never allowed myself to have a bold opinion about things. I might think it, but I didn't say it. I was always kind of the peacekeeper. I was always kind of like, don't rock the boat. Don't make anybody mad. Like huge fears of abandonment from experiences that I'd had when I did rock the boat and the collateral damage of that. And there just comes a point where you realize, okay, this has to stop. This behavior, it has to stop. I always wanted to say something. I'm like, I have something to fucking say, but I never let it out. I never let it myself show up. And until we do that deeper dive into where is the block for real, my colleague, where is the block around hiring help? Like, where is that? That needs healing because your business cannot grow until you look at that. Like, what is the seed of that? Where does that come from? What is the trauma source? And it's not simple. We go through layers and it's this unlearning and this unthinking. And it's like our nervous system conditions us to create behaviors as survival adaptations. And this is going to be something you're going to hear me say a lot as well, is that I have a huge pet peeve about books that say, list all your negative beliefs, list all your negative beliefs. Because if someone were to ask me 2 years ago, 3 years ago, let's say, before I started creating content, why can't you create content? I would have been like, it's dumb, it's narcissistic. I would have come up with some sort of bullshit story without knowing that I can't because I'm afraid of getting in trouble for having an opinion. I would never have thought of that. Someone had to help me like go through that, right? To like undo those layers to get to the actual reason. So if you're blocked and you don't know why, you're in good company because we don't know why. That's the problem with trauma, is you don't know why. You don't know why we do it. If you knew, you'd probably stop it, right? So if you've been reading those books, like those self-help books, and they're list all your negative beliefs about blah, blah, blah. It's like, I don't know. Can you do it? Yeah, okay, probably. If you actually stopped and thought about it and you did like, the root cause theory analysis on it and everything. But most people going day to day, they don't know. She would tell you like, I can't make money because I don't trust anybody. I don't believe that people can do a good job. It's like, okay. Well, why do you think that? Right? And you go down and down and down and down. And you need a professional. You need someone who knows what they're doing to help you figure it out in a safe way, because it can be very traumatic. It can be very unsettling. When I was going through this, like thinking about why I wasn't creating content when I was doing this with a therapist, I was just devastated. I just was so devastated that this was my thought process. My whole life, I'd lived so small because I was afraid of getting in trouble. And I'm like 43. And but it wasn't conscious. I don't think about that consciously. So I couldn't have diagnosed that. Right. And then once I healed that and I told her what I was going to be doing with Never Launch on a Friday and like talking about trauma and healing. And I was terrified what she was going to say. And I was sort of nervous about it, but like I was going to do it anyway. You know what? I'm like, no, I've got something to say. And even in the quote unquote face of rejection or disapproval, I'm like, no, we're going for it. And that was huge growth to me. And so the point of this podcast is if you're a female agency owner and you keep running up against the same walls year after year after year, you're probably trying to change your mechanics, courses, coaches, consultants, programs, cohorts, all these things. You're probably trying to do all those things. And it's not getting you where you want to go. I'm going to challenge you. You got to look deeper. Instead of looking out, look in. Why can't I do this? Where am I stuck? Where is the trauma? Where is the belief that's holding me back without even knowing it? And work with someone who can guide you through that process. And if you don't know how to do that, I would be more than happy to connect you with other resources about therapists or connections or things like that. But it needs to be done because it can't be fixed from the outside. It's got to be fixed from the inside, right? It's not about adding, it's about removing. It's about removing these thoughts, these weeds in our head and these nervous system responses that keep us so trapped. And before you get mad at your nervous system or before you get mad at your body about it, it was trying to help you. If I was like, when I was a young kid and I was like a dependent child and I was living at home, I could not have functioned without my parents' support. So your nervous system is like, hey, mom gets mad when you do this. Okay, let's not do that. Let's just be the good kid. Let's not get in trouble, right? Let's just walk that line so she doesn't get mad at you, right? And when you're like 8, 6, 7, 8, 9, you don't realize you're putting this belief in your mind, right? And so we have to go back and unlearn it and unlearn it and unlearn it and recondition. But it was there because your nervous system assessed that there is threat. Let's keep you alive. Let's do this, right? So I want to hear from you as always. I want to hear your comments. I want to hear your thoughts. What do you think? What's a struggle that you've run up against that has kept you stuck and you don't know why. I want to hear from you. So have an awesome week. So excited to be here. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, and I'll see you next week.